Good morning, good afternoon, happy Friday, LinkedIn friends, HubSpot Nation. We are here with another episode of Let's Build HubSpot Onboarding with Mr. Willem Reus. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing pretty decent. It's just that there are always so many changes, and I am really looking forward to the time where we're gonna say, "Ooh, nothing new happened in HubSpot in the last 2 weeks." That will not
Yeah.
happen.
I thought about that. I was gonna ask a question like, what do we tell the people that are just, can I just have a minute? Like, can we just take a breath? And it's like, nope, you can't. You can't. I mean, as much as we'd like to, sorry, I don't know if we talked about it last week, but I've started to figure out how to verbalize this. Like, it's gonna be very hard to build a bridge to where we're going because we're not super sure where we're gonna build the bridge to. So for me, it's like there's gonna be a crossing of the chasm. You're just gonna have to jump over. Some people are gonna be ready to jump. It's not gonna be as far to jump for some people, and some people will not. And that's where those people are gonna have a tough time getting over that gap, um, because it's just gonna smack us in the face. It's at some point, all this stuff is converging, not in the most positive of ways, right? In my opinion, that these are solving for long-standing issues, including issues like our favorite topic of onboarding. It's just going to require a mindset shift in order
Yeah,
to solve it, right?
for a big part, yes, but and while everything you say is true, I'm also gonna give a slightly different perspective. So let's say that I have a company of 500 employees, and let's for now say that 3 months ago I was rethinking onboarding, and I was like, I'm gonna use this very cool product called Tango, and I'm gonna schedule time so that the right people can build the right manuals in there, and that will likely take, if I'm an old-fashioned company, that will likely take about a year to be completed, that project. And from there, we can actually start implementing that. And I already see you smiling. So the question is, if you think about that today, isn't that completely obsolete? And isn't there a better way? But if you want to continuously stay ahead of the curve, then what is the cost of that? And do you really want to be the early adapter? Do you want to be somewhere in the middle? Or do you want to be a little bit behind?
Yeah, that's where it's probably hard to be, I think, effectively or safely in the middle, let's say, right now. Because a lot of this, um, and I'm so excited for tomorrow because so much of this is just getting in and trying and figuring it out because it's never been done before, right? We've never been able to like this concept of HubSpot everywhere. That was the
Yeah.
first time I kind of heard it when Sejal said it this morning, and I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. But it's kind of like not just HubSpot, right? And that's why like the barriers are coming down and the the mindsets even on the HubSpot side are changing in terms of okay, not everybody's going to come in and use HubSpot proper and navigate all the things. So we got to connect. We just got to start connecting to everything. Right. And that's how we have HubSpot everywhere. So it might be accessing it from all these places. Um, and in that world, it's like, I mean, that's where it makes sense to talk about onboarding, right? And I'm excited for tomorrow because, well, most companies obviously do not have the luxury of doing what I'm about to do. Like the startups and the people who are starting right now have a significant advantage. And that's why we keep hearing about it. These 3 to 5 person teams that are starting to compete with large organizations because they don't have tech debt, they don't have process debt, they don't have people debt, right? Tomorrow, Nico and I are just going to get in there, start from scratch and say, what if we just had Claude, HubSpot, and Google? How far can we get to do all the things that a business needs? Because that's probably question number one, or it's a top question as you're purchasing HubSpot and as you're onboarding. Like, what is replaceable? And like, that's where MCP, if I think that's the first time we've said it in this episode. So in case you haven't heard, HubSpot MCP, Model Context Protocol, allows for accessing HubSpot data from directly from Claude and from GPT and any LLM that has an MCP client, right? In ways that we've been anticipating, and some people have been building it on the sides, right? But back to this manipulation of data from outside of HubSpot in a conversational way, right? Like, how do you even define that use case when you're setting up a HubSpot instance?
The way I look at it, and if I look at onboarding, the way I look at onboarding, let's start with that. It is the next step after the purchase. So how much do the people know about HubSpot? Well, they've seen a demo. They know roughly what it can do. They started paying, and now they just want the thing to work and get ROI. So what you're thinking, how you're thinking about HubSpot is you already know how the data model works. You already know how everything is connected. If I put an LLM, and I'm not even going to use the name Claude because it doesn't matter, in front of you, you can think about it from the perspective of the data model. You can think about everything just like, oh, we're going to do it that way. But how did you get there, Chris? How did you get to the point that you know how it works? And I think that that is something that everybody underestimates. You made mistakes. This is nothing personally against you. I probably made 10 times the mistakes that you did, but we all paid a price. And on one hand, the challenges, but also the opportunities of any LLM is you can get the LLM to make the mistake once, potentially ask the developers to include that, or even prevent the mistakes in a lot of cases. But if I ask you right now, with what you've seen from HubSpot, if a competitor of HubSpot, and we're not going to name names, it doesn't matter. If any competitor of HubSpot has built out the exact same, how sure are you that you can only view the fields in the API requests that you have access to? Because this isn't just about all the data in the CRM. This is about permissions. That is one of the first things that you set up as a decent sized company. However, if you and again, this is not to try to be positive or negative, but if you have a small team, you build out a CRM, are you going to include permission sets in there? Or is that something that you think about like, yeah, well, one day, maybe, and you can show something that's twice as cool, 3 times as fast. And if I was a traditional firm, like let's say a bank, I'm going to look at that and I'm going to say, no, I'm not going to be one of the early adopters. I'm not going to be in the middle. I'm going to be the very, very last. Let's first wait for 5 years to see how this pans out.
Oh, 5 years. Uh,
I know, but on the other hand, it
I
has
hear you.
always worked like that. And that is the whole discussion, the joke about the two horses in 1900 talking to each other saying, well, this has always worked out for us, right? The relationship between horses and humans. Look where we are. We are at the absolute peak of comfort and our population and that sort of thing. So these strange automobiles, it will be fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that makes sense to say that. Just like it makes sense for me to say, no, let's just wait for a bit. But the question is that feasible?
Right. And
Because
how long is
not
a bit?
everything that makes sense
Right.
will actually work.
Right. Well, that's where it's like a bit, waiting a bit is turning out not to be very long right now. Right. And, uh, it's funny, like George and I got a chuckle and Sejal very nonchalantly said that HubSpot's moving fast right now. it's like, it's like, yeah. And that's where you say 5 years. I've already commented, I think, on Clement's post. Like it's funny to listen to us. It's understandable why, because it is uncomfortably fast right now in all of the
Absolutely.
ways, right? But that's where, like, when before you said 5 years, I'm like, okay, end of the year, you're going to be the last adopter, right? And that's where, even though I talk about this gap that we're going to have to like jump over, like AI is probably going to help you get over the gap, like in some way, right? Because you're talking about permissions, and by that time, it's going to be like push button, or like just talk to the salesperson or sales manager, and your sales managers can be like, "Yep, this person should be able to see this, and this person this," and then the LLM's got it, right? But something I wanted to dig into, because and thank you for helping me just think through this and talk through this out loud,
With the 5 years, right?
right? Because like what I positioned it, obviously the way that we don't want to position it is like solutioning first or figuring out what the tool is going to be and then coming back, right? So I'm like, how do we think about use cases related to using HubSpot through the MCP, which is not the right way to think about it. But then as you described our mistakes that we've made, right? And the first one that came to mind, and why we do this show and why we do the adoption show, is the guaranteed mistake that everybody has made is, okay, here's HubSpot. This is ready. Like,
Yeah.
go ahead, start using it. So as I thought through that, it's like, okay, so we sold HubSpot. We know that adoption is hard. And maybe they're not using LLM at all, right? But for an additional $20 a month, we could include that, and now adoption gets significantly easier, right? Do they already have to be using the LLM? Is that the only way we can do it? Or is that the way we should teach, like CRMs now?
First of all, the question is it really only $20 a month? Because what you are looking at is what you pay Anthropics. What I'm looking at is the potential learning curve to set everything up and the time that I spent creating the wrong thing. Because for me, when I saw what you could do, the first thing that I thought about was reporting API version 3 beta. Now that will hopefully not ring a bell for you,
No.
but we had a beta where you could say, and I'm talking about in a website, you could say that custom report, give me the underlying data. So that means that on a website, you could regenerate or recreate the report. That beta is pulled in hindsight, we say it never happened, but it was there, trust me. So that is one of the things that some of our customers are really desperate for. I want to show you how we are doing. I want to pull specific CRM information for that. I want to showcase that in a nice graph. Now we have a way to do it. But if you are very new to using Claude and you look at it and you ask it, how do I make tomato soup? And you are totally amazed that you actually get an answer. And now I tell you, you know what? Create me a page that shows the report with the occupation of every individual segmented in a certain way. And yeah, now go. And you're thinking like, ooh, that's not tomato soup. Where do you actually start? You likely have no idea. You can ask it, but
Yep.
and the first thing that you will create is not the nicest report, but it will literally look more like tomato soup while you expect a report. How many people have told you, well, you know, I tried to do something with Claude or ChatGPT. It's not playing ball. And then the
Yep.
question is, which one is it? Are they asking the wrong question? Is the LLM not understanding them correctly? Or maybe a combination?
Yeah.
And if you think about onboarding from that perspective, and let's say that you work at HubSpot, we're going to switch roles. You work in HubSpot, you are trying to sell me as the CFO some fancy CRM tool that's called HubSpot or something like that. And you're saying that that will cost me 40K a year. And that includes the onboarding fee of, let's say, 10K for the first year, including a custom quote and the whole shebang. And I'm looking at that and I'm saying, well, you know, we have Johnny sitting here. Johnny's quite handy. He will figure it out. Can't we just skip the onboarding? And now you're telling me that Johnny should figure out how to make tomato soup through an LLM? It just will not work. We'll get there in 2-3 years' time. And then the other question that a customer should ask himself or herself is, and what exactly was the cost of that? Us taking 2 years? But that's a whole different discussion. The initial discussion is, can we save a penny on the onboarding, on the license? And that has pros and cons.
Yeah. I mean, if I want to be having that conversation with anybody on the customer side, it's definitely the CFO. Because I think there's a very easy way to make the case for like dollar value in versus dollar value out, and like the 2-year journey, the consequences of cutting that and how much it can cost later on. Like the CFOs, I mean, it's a very nuanced conversation, obviously. But there is a way to have it that, like, finance teams, I love talking to finance teams. Like, they love clean data that they don't question, and that allows them to get paid faster and understand, financials faster, without uh, it. There's a big trust curve for them, but once you prove it, right? Especially with HubSpot, you can get there. You just got to relate it to the things that HubSpot's good at, right? Like the centralized data model around a customer view, like creating a unified customer view first and foremost. And that's where it's like, I mean, I might already suggest, and this is where the consultant piece comes in, obviously, because I believe in the next month, I'll be able to help set up this MCP or whatever the situation is. Like, okay, CFO, That means we need to handle the integrations like upfront. And if we can connect all the data into HubSpot, we can create a conversational experience for this one person. Here's all the prompts that they're going to do to start to learn the system. Here's what they don't do. Here's how you monitor them, right? That's where everything changes, right? But it's possible. And that's where like we always come back to like mindset shift, right? Like we think that we're going to get to this, we're going to get back to this easy button place where the stuff is doing it for us. And it's, you just create these transactional order taking situation. Instead, we're going in the other direction. Like you have to create a learning mindset at this moment to be able to accept the fact that nothing is slowing down, right? The HubSpot you bought 3 months ago is different from the HubSpot right now. And if you found out there was something like MCP or like AI video marketing, AI powered video marketing platform, or Commerce Hub, sales tax automation, and currency, automated currency conversion. These are things that are business functions that can get rid of systems that are very, very costly, right?
in
And
a
if
lot of cases.
right,
And
and if you
the disadvantage there is that in some cases it can't. And how often should you check if it is capable of doing that now?
right,
And what's the cost of that?
right. Well, that's what I mean by the learning. Like you can't think it's okay. I bought HubSpot for this. We're gonna implement it for this. Like, and we're done. Right? That's the worst place. Whether you have one person learning and onboarding, or whether you have 10 or 100. Right? It puts everybody in a worse position to be successful with HubSpot, in my opinion. Which means it's going to be harder to get the return, for that CFO who's wondering. That's where it's like, hey, like, yeah, this one person can do it, but here's the journey instead. Like you might not be able to just get immediate leads in return on emails, right? But here's a different path where this person could take it, you know, to learn the system and be ready and like take a more advanced approach, let's say, to onboarding into HubSpot in the most agile of ways, right? Um,
What I'm still considering is that most companies want to do long-term planning. And despite that, it's not the time for that. A lot of companies still are like, no, but we're going to do long-term planning. And that includes the tech stack. So right now, let's say today we're going to switch to HubSpot. We're going to start paying HubSpot. We have an implementation schedule of about 12 months where we know every month which department is going over to which tool, what they will actually use. So today we're going to take a snapshot of what everything looks like in the world. We're going to base everything on that. And for the next 12 months, we're going to make relatively little changes to the planning that we have. And I see you basically saying no, but to give a little bit of context about that, if you implement a change in and you're a small company, let's say 3 or 5 people, how long does it take before you actually can make that change between that the first person sticks a finger up and says, I have an idea, and that it's live? That will go really, really fast. But there are a lot of companies with a lot of red tape, and that just requires a ton of time. That means that every change you make requires so much investment from a management perspective, because you have to get the entire board together and 300 people have to have an opinion about that. And that's just too hard. And if then you come along and you say, well, today we have another HubSpot update, I want you to change everything again. The whole company will come to a halt, because it is meeting after meeting after meeting. And the next day you come in again and you say, well, get everybody together again. And no work will be done.
Right. To be
So
clear, that's not what I'm suggesting for sure.
And if you look at a company like HubSpot, that's not how it works. Decisions can be made fast, but that
Right.
is where you should really look at not just the onboarding of a product, but also like, okay, what is the current time? And I don't mean, it's 9 o'clock or whatever. What I mean is like, what decision-making processes fit the time that we live in, fit the speed of changes that we live in. And if you think about that, how do you want to onboard? Because if you start with how do I want to onboard and how do I change the world to fit my desire to onboard, which I'm going to say is a fair question to just ask the world to change. It's the same with people, in my opinion, rightfully saying, well, can't we just kill AI and go back to how it was 20 years ago? There are pros and cons there. But the simple truth is, no, you can't. That's not how it works.
Yep. Unlikely. Unlikely to happen. Yeah. And I again, that brings us back to the pillars of onboarding, setting expectations, and um, like focusing on process and outcomes, data model. Like there is a way, there are companies, and this is where it's like if you're too big, like there's gonna be some too big stuff, like the opposite of too big to fail, basically. Like the bigger you are, the harder it is going to be to maneuver through this change. Um, uh, and but when you have leadership teams who are agile, I mean, that's where it's very clear that HubSpot made a decision to invest in product. That means there's a huge product org. And that's, of course, that's why they can move so fast, right? You have alignment and then you just resource it. You resource where you want to go. And if we decide, so that's why the team starting up, they've decided we don't need headcount. We've got these tools. We can set it up with constraints, with different constraints than everybody else has built out their companies, right? So that's a natural advantage. But I'd say any leadership team, has to find a way to get there, to be agile. At least at the very first step is agile decision making, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Like you have all the tools around you. That is 100% a human-led obstacle, the red tape that you talk of, right? So much to the point that when you ask these LLMs for timelines and like they'll tell you how many meetings need to be had to get through this thing because humans need a lot of meetings and they need a lot of discussions. And at the end of the day, it's like, oh, we decided that last month. And now we finally get to move forward with it this month because everybody's, appeased and we've diluted it along the way, all this stuff, right? So I think that's why me personally, as I talk to people, it's like, can we get there? Like, and one thing we should talk about next time is what does this mean for HubSpot's role, right? Because that's a question that I always try to answer with, the people investing in HubSpot. Because the role is, if it's a conversational CRM, right? And our team is not going into it to do their daily tasks, like the role changes a little bit. Definitely depending on how you use it, but like talking about that role as a like a relational database, first to support this new UI layer, basically, that is the LLMs. I think is an interesting conversation that
Absolutely.
we can chat about and help people think about. Because now, as I think about it out loud, oh man, our centralized view of the customer might not be in HubSpot anymore. If we're asking Claude about it.
The question is, what is HubSpot at that point in time? And you say going into HubSpot. I'm going to actually say anytime you ask Claude something in, let's say, 6 months' time, where you say, oh, tell me something about that person, you're in HubSpot.
Right.
You might not even realize it because you have no idea where the information is coming from. If that's coming from LinkedIn, or which part is coming from LinkedIn, which part is coming from, maybe you can even hook up Clay, or maybe you have 3 different CRMs because you work at 3 different companies. So I don't know. I just asked a question and I got an answer, and I was in all systems. I was everywhere all at once, basically.
That helps me
So,
understand HubSpot everywhere, for
yeah.
sure. Oh, I'm
Are you
excited for this
then
world.
not really in HubSpot? I'm gonna say you are.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. Now, if we can just get uh, HubSpot to trigger Claude, and then but trigger the MCP part of Claude and not the API part of Claude. That I was trying to do that today. It was very helpful. Claude was very helpful in helping me understand the difference between the HubSpot Anthropic integration that allows you to ask Anthropic during a workflow is completely different from the MCP stuff we've been talking about.
At this point in time.
Yeah. Yeah. For how long? Who knows?
Yeah.
Oh, we could go on for a while, for sure. But interesting as always. I want to ask, let me just ask this before we go. On the sales side of HubSpot, this conversation about the role change, the MCP, all the AI. The only thing I've gotten is some emails about research intent data, asking to add that on. What is it inside? What's the inside vibe on the sales side of things? Is it a headache, or?
I'm gonna say not so much, because there are, for me, 2 different ways of looking at HubSpot. You have where we need to go, and that means that if you look at the product right now, how it is, it's already outdated for half a year, because we need to be where we are in half a year right now. And that will never change. That was 10 years ago. That was 5 years ago. We're always, if you have the right mindset, you feel like you are behind. You should implement something cooler and fancier. But if you look at what customers want, they are really like, yeah, I already saw a demo 2 years ago, so don't really need another demo because it really looked nice. That may be good enough. Because what you're thinking about is, okay, how do I make sure that the customer gets there? But in a way, if the customer is happy enough with this, pros and cons, it's a very tricky situation, because as HubSpot, we provide the platform. We don't provide a consultant.
Strategy.
And we can give you some pointers. But if you're like, nah, that's what did you say again? LLM? Is that something similar as LLC? Right? So
That's so
yeah,
true.
I must have heard about that.
Yeah.
If they still benefit from at least that step up, then as the creators of the product, we're like, yeah, we have done our bit. We're going to point them in the right direction. We're going to try to make sure that they make the right choices. But handholding is not part of the package.
Yeah, that's what we're here for. We're
Exactly.
happy to hold hands. Well, fun as always. Lots to continue talking about next week. We didn't even get to customer agent changing to a credits model. Just drop that in there at the end. I love the direction for all of the reasons. So many good things happening there. But yeah, we will save a little bit for next week. And until then, thanks so much, Willem.
Talk to you then. Bye.
Have a great weekend, everybody.